alcoholic father sells his 10-year-old daughter to work as a domestic servant for a wealthy family. Years later, he encounters an elegant woman on the street and falls to his knees before her when he discovers that. Layla's small hands trembled as she cracked the last egg into the pan, carefully ensuring none of the shell fell in. At 10 years old, she had mastered the art of making breakfast without wasting a single ingredient. They couldn't afford waste anymore. From the living room, her father's heavy snoring continued, punctuated by occasional mumbles. Layla glanced at the clock, 6:45 a.m. She had exactly 15 minutes to wake him before he'd be late for work again. Last week's warning from his supervisor still echoed in her mind. One more late arrival, Connor, and you're done. The toast popped up, slightly burnt. Layla scraped it quickly over the sink, her movements practiced and efficient. The smell of coffee began filling their small kitchen, a scent that had become synonymous with her morning routine of trying to wake her father from his alcohol-induced slumber. "Dad," she called out softly, approaching the couch where Michael Connor lay sprawled, an empty bottle still clutched in his hand. "Dad, you need to get up." 6 months. It had been 6 months since Mom's funeral, and Layla still caught herself waiting to hear her mother's footsteps in the morning, expecting to feel her gentle hand brushing hair away from her face. Instead, she now played that role herself, trying to coax her father back to consciousness day after day. 5 more minutes, Michael grumbled, turning his face into the couch cushion. The bottle slipped from his grasp, rolling under the coffee table to join others from previous nights. Layla's throat tightened. "You can't have 5 minutes, Dad," Mr. Peterson said. "I know what Peterson said," Michael snapped, his bloodshot eyes suddenly open. The harshness in his voice made Layla step back instinctively, a movement that didn't go unnoticed by her father. His face softened immediately, shame replacing anger. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I didn't mean to." "I made eggs," Layla interrupted, not wanting to hear another apology. They had become as routine as the breakfast she prepared. "And coffee's ready." Michael sat up slowly, his movements stiff and pained. Layla watched him press his palms against his temples, the familiar morning headache setting in. She'd already placed 2 aspirin next to his coffee cup, another part of their daily ritual. In the bathroom, Layla could hear the tap running as her father splashed water on his face. She quickly packed her school lunch, a single peanut butter sandwich and an apple she'd been saving. Her school uniform, washed by hand the night before, was still slightly damp where it hung near the radiator. "You should eat something too," Michael said, emerging from the bathroom looking marginally more human. He picked up his fork, then set it down again, pushing the plate away. "I can't." "Not this morning," Layla nodded, wrapping his untouched breakfast in foil and placing it in the fridge. More food for later, she reasoned, ignoring the gnawing emptiness in her own stomach. She'd learned to save everything, to stretch every meal as far as it would go. "Your teacher, Mrs. Reynolds. She called yesterday," Michael said, sipping his coffee with trembling hands. "While you were at the library." Layla froze in the middle of packing her backpack. Mrs. Reynolds had noticed. Of course she had. The unwashed uniform, the incomplete homework, the times she'd fallen asleep in class. "She's worried about you," Michael continued, his voice cracking. "Says you seem tired. That you're not being a kid anymore." The words hung heavy in the air between them. Layla busied herself with straightening the papers on the counter, avoiding her father's gaze. "We're going to be late," she said finally. "You need to get dressed for work." Michael stared at his daughter for a long moment, seeing in her small frame the weight of responsibilities no child should bear. He opened his mouth as if to say something more, then closed it again. Standing up, he swayed slightly before steadying himself against the counter. "I'll do better," he whispered, more to himself than to Layla. "I promise I'll do better." Layla said nothing, having learned months ago that promises made in the morning light rarely survived until sunset. Instead, she shouldered her backpack and headed for the door, pausing only to make sure her father was actually getting ready for work. As they left their apartment, Layla locked the door with the key she kept on a string around her neck. The same string held another key, one to the bottom drawer of her dresser, where she hid the remaining food stamps and the last $20 from her mother's final paycheck. Emergency money, she called it, though every day was beginning to feel like an emergency. "Have a good day at school, sweetheart," Michael said as they parted ways at the corner. Layla watched him walk toward the bus stop, his steps unsteady but determined. She counted in her head. 6 hours until school ended. Another 2 at the library where she could do her homework in warmth and quiet, then home to start dinner and wash her uniform again. One day at a time, just like Mom used to say. She squared her shoulders and turned toward school, already planning how to explain to Mrs. Reynolds that everything was fine, that she was just having trouble sleeping, that her father was doing his best. The lies had become as much a part of her morning routine as making breakfast and brewing coffee. After all, she was her father's keeper now. The letter from the power company sat unopened on the kitchen table, its red final notice stamp visible through the thin envelope. Layla stared at it while eating her cereal, the same way she'd been staring at it for 3 days. She knew what it said, the same thing as the gas bill and the rent notice. They were running out of time and, more importantly, money. "You're up early," Mrs. Kelly said from the doorway, startling Layla. Their elderly neighbor had taken to checking on them in the mornings, especially after the nights when Michael's shouting could be heard through the thin walls. "Your father." Working an early shift, Layla lied smoothly, spooning the last of her cereal into her mouth. They both knew Michael hadn't come home last night. Mrs. Kelly's eyes lingered on the pile of bills, then on Layla's unwashed hair. "You know, sweetie, I could help you with." "We're fine," Layla cut her off, standing up abruptly. "Dad's got a new job opportunity. Everything's going to be better now." Another lie. Michael had stopped even looking for work 2 weeks ago, after being fired from the warehouse for showing up drunk. Layla had watched him throw his work boots into the dumpster behind their building, cursing the supervisor who'd had it out for him from the start. Mrs. Kelly stepped into the apartment, her worn slippers shuffling against the linoleum. "Layla, honey, you can't keep." The sound of breaking glass from the hallway interrupted her. Layla's heart sank as she recognized her father's heavy, uneven footsteps approaching. She quickly moved toward Mrs. Kelly, trying to usher her out. "You should go. He doesn't like people here in the morning." But it was too late. Michael stumbled through the door, his shirt stained and eyes unfocused. He squinted at Mrs. Kelly, then at Layla, swaying slightly where he stood. "What's this?" he slurred. "Having a little morning social?" "I was just leaving," Mrs. Kelly said firmly, but she didn't move toward the door. Instead, she positioned herself slightly in front of Layla, a gesture that made Michael's face darken. "In my house," he continued as if she hadn't spoken, "talking about me, are you? Poor little Layla with her drunk daddy?" His voice rose with each word, the familiar edge of anger creeping in. Layla touched Mrs. Kelly's arm. "Please," she whispered, "just go. You think I don't know what you all say?" Michael was shouting now, tears mixing with rage. Poor Michael Connor. Couldn't handle losing his wife. Couldn't keep his job. Couldn't. "That's enough." Mrs. Kelly's voice cracked like a whip. "Look at your daughter, Michael. Look at what you're doing to her." Michael's gaze shifted to Layla, and for a moment, clarity seemed to break through the alcoholic haze. She stood rigid, her school uniform wrinkled, her face too old for her years. His expression crumpled. "Get out," he whispered to Mrs. Kelly. When she didn't move, he roared, "Get out." Layla flinched at the sound, and that small movement seemed to break something in Michael. He stumbled to the couch, collapsing onto it with a sob. Mrs. Kelly turned to Layla, her eyes filled with tears. "Pack a bag, honey. You can stay with me." But Layla was already shaking her head. "I can't leave him," she said, her voice barely audible. "He needs me." "You're a child," Mrs. Kelly insisted. "You need—" "Please," Layla cut her off again. "Just go. I'll be fine. We'll be fine." After Mrs. Kelly left, Layla moved quietly around the apartment, picking up empty bottles and straightening what she could. Michael's sobs had quieted to irregular breathing. He'd passed out again. She carefully removed his shoes and covered him with the threadbare blanket from the back of the couch. In her room, Layla pulled out the bottom drawer of her dresser and reached for her emergency money. $20 wouldn't cover any of the bills, but it might keep the power on if she could convince them to accept a partial payment. She'd learned that sometimes, if she cried while explaining about her mother's death, the utility workers would give them an extension. The school bell would be ringing soon, but for the first time, Layla didn't rush to get ready. Instead, she sat on her bed, holding her mother's old perfume bottle, the last one with any fragrance still clinging to it. She used to spray a tiny bit on her wrist on the hardest days, but now she just held it, afraid to waste the last traces of her mother's scent. A knock at the door made her jump. Through the thin walls, she could hear multiple voices in the hallway. Her heart began to race as she recognized one of them, the social worker who'd visited last month. Layla quickly shoved the perfume bottle and money back into the drawer. She grabbed her backpack, already formulating the explanations she'd need. Her father was sick, not drunk. The bills were paid, just lost in the mail. Everything was fine. Everything had to be fine because the alternative, losing her father, her home, the last pieces of her life with Mom, was unthinkable. As the knocking grew more insistent, Layla squared her shoulders and moved toward the door, ready to protect the only family she had left, even if it meant lying to the world, even if it meant lying to herself. Layla sat in the social worker's office, her feet dangling above the floor, watching her father sign papers with trembling hands. Miss Parker, with her neat suit and gentle smile, had been talking for nearly an hour about rehabilitation, support systems, and second chances. "This is a unique opportunity, Mr. Connor," Miss Parker said, sliding another form across her desk. "The state-funded program has an excellent success rate, and you'll be able to maintain custody of Layla while receiving treatment." Michael nodded repeatedly, his signature becoming steadier with each document. "I'll do anything," he kept saying, glancing at Layla. "Whatever it takes." Layla had heard these promises before, but something felt different this time. Maybe it was the way her father's hands shook from withdrawal rather than intoxication. Maybe it was the determined set of his jaw. Or maybe it was simply hope, desperate and dangerous, taking root in her heart again. The first week of the program brought changes. Michael attended daily meetings, coming home with colored chips and a nervous energy that he channeled into cleaning their apartment. Layla found him one evening attempting to cook dinner, burning it, but trying nonetheless. "We'll order pizza," he said, scraping blackened chicken into the trash. "Just this once. Tomorrow I'll do better." By the second week, Layla started finding notes in her lunch bag. Simple things. "Have a good day," or "You make me proud." She kept each one, tucking them into her mother's old jewelry box, afraid to trust their permanence but unable to throw them away. The third week marked the longest Michael had been sober since her mother's death. Layla's teacher commented on the improvement in her homework, the alertness in her eyes. Even Mrs. Kelly noticed, bringing over a casserole, just because rather than out of worry. "Your father's really trying this time," Mrs. Kelly said, watching Layla put the casserole in the fridge. "I saw him walking to his meeting yesterday. Head up, clean-shaven." Layla allowed herself to smile. "He's different now. He's like he used to be." That evening, Michael came home with news. "They're offering me my old job back," he announced. "At the warehouse. Peterson says if I can stay clean, I can start next month." They celebrated with ice cream, a luxury they hadn't afforded in months. Layla watched her father eat, noticing the color returning to his face, the clarity in his eyes. For the first time in forever, they talked about the future. Painting her room, maybe getting a cat, taking a trip to the beach next summer like they used to. The parent-teacher conference was scheduled for Friday. Michael pressed his one good shirt and practiced his talking points. Layla helped him prepare questions about her academics, her heart swelling with each small sign of his engagement in her life. They arrived at school early. Layla watched proudly as her father chatted with other parents. No trace of alcohol on his breath or shame in his posture. Mrs. Reynolds welcomed them warmly, spreading Layla's recent assignments across her desk. "Layla's shown remarkable improvement," Mrs. Reynolds began. "Her last test scores were..." The door burst open. Peterson from the warehouse stood there, red-faced and angry. "Connor, you didn't show for your screening test. Third time this week." Layla felt her world tilt. She turned to her father, praying to see confusion on his face, hoping for a mistake. Instead, she saw guilt, then anger, then the familiar mask of defensive pride. "You're not my boss yet, Peterson," Michael snarled, rising. The slight sway in his stance confirmed Layla's worst fears. "Dad," she whispered, "you promised." "Not now, Layla." The words came out harsh, slurred at the edges. Mrs. Reynolds stood. "Perhaps we should reschedule." "No need," Michael snapped. "We're done here." He grabbed Layla's arm, pulling her toward the door. She could smell it now. The vodka he'd hidden in water bottles, the lies he'd wrapped in temporary sobriety. In the hallway, Peterson blocked their path. "You need help, Connor. Real help. That girl deserves." Michael's fist connected with Peterson's jaw before he could finish. Layla screamed as both men fell, trading blows while teachers rushed to intervene. She backed away, her father's promises crumbling like ashes in her mouth. Hours later, after the police left and Mrs. Kelly took her home, Layla sat on her bed holding her mother's perfume bottle. She pulled out the lunch notes she'd saved, reading each one slowly before tearing them to pieces. In the living room, she could hear Michael returning, his apologies already beginning. She closed her door, drowning out his words with her pillow. The hope that had bloomed so brightly withered and died, leaving behind only the bitter understanding that some promises were beyond her father's power to keep. False dawn, she thought. Just another false dawn. Layla stood in the school hallway, staring at the notice taped to her locker. "Student account past due," glared at her in bold letters. 3 months of unpaid lunch fees had finally caught up with her. She carefully folded the paper and tucked it into her bag, adding it to her mental list of problems to solve. "Miss Connor," a deep voice behind her made her turn. "I'm looking for your classroom." The man wore an expensive suit that seemed out of place in their rundown public school. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Layla noticed his polished shoes, his gold watch, the way he carried himself like he owned the building. "Mr. Harrison." Mrs. Reynolds appeared suddenly. "I wasn't expecting you until this afternoon. I had some time this morning," he replied smoothly. "Thought I'd get a feel for the environment." Layla felt his eyes on her again, assessing, calculating. She clutched her backpack tighter and hurried to class, but not before hearing him ask, "That's Michael Connor's daughter, isn't it?" That evening, Layla found her father surprisingly sober, sitting at their kitchen table with Mr. Harrison. Empty coffee cups sat between them, along with papers Layla couldn't quite see. "Layla," Michael said, his voice unusually controlled. "This is Mr. Harrison. He's here to help us." "Help how?" Layla remained in the doorway, instinctively distrustful. "Your father tells me you're quite the little housekeeper," Harrison said, his smile still not reaching his eyes. "Cooking, cleaning, quite responsible for your age." Layla said nothing, watching as Harrison pulled out more papers from his leather briefcase. "My wife and I," he continued, "we have a large home. Beautiful property. We've been looking for someone with your particular talents." "I don't understand," Layla said, though a cold fear was beginning to spread through her chest. "It's an opportunity," Michael interrupted quickly. "A real one. You'd have your own room, proper meals, good clothes. They'd pay for your schooling." "Pay?" The word hung in the air like poison. Harrison cleared his throat. "We're prepared to be quite generous. Your father's debts would be cleared. A fresh start for everyone." Layla looked at her father, waiting for him to throw this man out, to reject whatever he was suggesting. Instead, Michael stared at his hands, unable to meet her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere," Layla said firmly. "Sleep on it," Harrison stood, gathering his papers. "Think about the possibilities. A better life, better opportunities." He placed a card on the table. "Call me when you're ready to discuss details." After he left, Layla rounded on her father. "You can't be serious. They're good people, Layla. Rich people. They can give you what I can't." I don't want what they can give me. Her voice rose. I want my father. Michael's face crumpled. And what kind of father am I? Look at this place. Look at what I've done to you. We can fix it, Layla pleaded. Like before. You can try again. I've tried. Michael slammed his hand on the table. I've tried and failed and tried and failed. And each time, you're the one who suffers. Layla backed away. You're going to sell me? Like some kind of servant? No, it's not like that. It's an arrangement. A job. A chance for you to have the life you deserve. I deserve my father, Layla whispered. Michael reached for the card Harrison had left. His hands were shaking, but not from withdrawal this time. Sometimes, he said softly, being a father means knowing when to let go. Layla ran to her room, slamming the door. Through the thin walls, she heard the familiar sound of a bottle being opened. She pulled out her mother's perfume, clutching it as tears fell. Late that night, she heard Michael on the phone. Yes, Mr. Harrison. Yes, we've decided. Tomorrow would be. Yes, I understand the terms. Layla pressed her hands against her ears, but she couldn't block out the sound of her father selling her future one quiet word at a time. Layla woke before dawn, her backpack already filled with essentials. 2 changes of clothes, her mother's perfume bottle, and the emergency money from her drawer. She moved silently through the apartment, knowing every creaky floorboard to avoid. Her father's bedroom door was open, revealing him passed out fully clothed. Empty bottles surrounded his bed. He'd spent the night drinking away whatever Harrison had given him as a down payment. The front door wasn't locked. Layla almost laughed at the irony. After years of obsessively locking up to keep them safe, her father had forgotten on the night she needed to escape. Her hand was on the doorknob when his voice froze her in place. Going somewhere? Michael's words were surprisingly clear. Layla turned slowly. He stood in the hallway, more sober than she'd expected, his eyes fixed on her backpack. You can't stop me, she said, trying to sound brave despite her trembling voice. No, he agreed, taking a step forward. But they can. 2 men stepped out of the shadows of their living room. Layla hadn't even known they were there. Security guards from Harrison's estate, she realized, recognizing their uniforms from yesterday. Mr. Harrison thought you might try something like this, one of them said kindly. It's okay. We're here to help with the transition. Help? Layla backed against the door. You're here to take me away. Layla, please, Michael moved closer. Don't make this harder. Harder. She laughed. A broken sound. Harder than selling your daughter? Harder than choosing alcohol over me? Harder than... Enough. Michael's shout made her flinch. He immediately softened his voice. This is for your own good. You'll understand someday. The guards moved with practiced efficiency. One blocked the door while the other approached Layla with gentle, professional movements. Let's get your things together properly. Mrs. Harrison has a room all ready for you. How long? Layla asked her father, not resisting as the guard took her backpack. How long have you been planning this? Michael couldn't meet her eyes. Harrison approached me weeks ago. He saw you helping at the school bake sale. Said you had a good work ethic. Said his wife needed. Weeks? The betrayal hit Layla like a physical blow. All those promises about getting better, about trying again. You were just stalling until you could get rid of me? No. I tried, Layla. I really tried. But this is better. They can give you everything I can't. I never asked for everything, Layla whispered. I just wanted you. The guards exchanged glances, their professional demeanor cracking slightly at the raw emotion in the room. We should go, one said quietly. Mrs. Harrison is expecting us by 8. Layla allowed herself to be led toward the door, her body moving on autopilot. At the last moment, she turned back. Mom would hate you for this. The words hit Michael like bullets. He staggered, reaching for the wall to steady himself. Layla, please. But Layla was already walking away, escorted by the guards. She didn't run, didn't fight. Every step down the hallway, every floor down in the elevator, every mile in the car that took her to the Harrison estate, She felt herself hardening, building walls around her heart. As they pulled through the ornate gates of her new prison, Layla made a promise to herself. She would survive this. She would rise above it. And someday, when she was strong enough, she would make sure no other child had to feel this kind of betrayal. In the apartment, Michael Connor picked up the phone with shaking hands. Harrison answered on the first ring. "It's done," Michael said, his voice hollow. "The money will be transferred as discussed," Harrison replied smoothly. "You've made the right choice, Mr. Connor. She'll have a better life now." Michael hung up and reached for a bottle, trying to drown out his daughter's last words. But even as the alcohol burned his throat, he could still hear them, clear as a bell. "Mom would hate you for this." He had no way of knowing it would be 15 years before he saw his daughter again. "These will be your duties," Mrs. Harrison said, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she led Layla through the mansion. Her voice was precise, emotionless. "You'll assist with breakfast preparation at 6 a.m. The children must have fresh uniforms pressed by 7 a.m. After they leave for school, you'll help Maria with the general housekeeping." Layla clutched her small backpack, trying to memorize each instruction while fighting back tears. The mansion felt vast and cold, despite its obvious luxury. "Your room is here in the service wing." Mrs. Harrison opened a door to reveal a small but clean space. A single bed, a dresser, and a desk occupied most of the room. "You'll share a bathroom with Maria down the hall. I understand you're used to different conditions, but I expect this space to be maintained to our standards." Layla placed her backpack on the bed. Through the small window, she could see the guards who had brought her pulling away in their dark car, taking with them her last connection to her old life. "Layla," Mrs. Harrison's voice sharpened. "Are you listening?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Now, about your education, you'll continue attending school. A driver will take you each morning after your duties are complete. I expect excellent grades. The Harrisons don't accept mediocrity, even from our staff. Staff." The word hit Layla like a slap. She was 10 years old, and she had become staff. "Emily and James will be home from school at 3 p.m., Mrs. Harrison continued. "Emily is 13, James is 8. You'll help them with their homework if needed, then assist cook with dinner preparation." A bell rang somewhere in the house. Mrs. Harrison checked her watch. "That's Maria. She'll show you the rest." She turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing, Layla. The past is the past. Whatever life you had before, whatever circumstances brought you here, they don't exist anymore. You're part of the Harrison household now. Remember that." Maria appeared in the doorway, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and calloused hands. She waited until Mrs. Harrison left before approaching Layla. "Come, Pequeña," she said softly. "Let me show you how things work here." The next hours passed in a blur of instructions. Layla learned about the family's preferences. Mr. Harrison's shirts needed extra starch. Emily was allergic to strawberries. James wouldn't eat anything green. She memorized cleaning schedules, laundry routines, and the precise way Mrs. Harrison liked the table set. "What about—" Layla hesitated. "What about when I'm not working?" Maria's face softened with understanding. "Sundays are half-days. After church, you'll have the afternoon to yourself." "But Layla—" She knelt to meet the girl's eyes. "This isn't prison, but it isn't freedom either. You understand?" Layla nodded, thinking of her father, wondering if he missed her yet. That evening, Layla met the Harrison children. Emily took one look at her and rolled her eyes. "Another charity case? Really, Mother?" James, however, smiled shyly. "Do you know how to play video games?" "James," Mrs. Harrison's voice cut through the air. "Layla is here to work, not play. She's staff, not a guest." Layla watched James's smile fade, replaced by the same distant politeness his sister wore. In that moment, she understood, in this house of marble and money, she was invisible. A ghost in a child's body, meant to serve but never be seen. Later, in her new room, Layla finally allowed herself to cry. She pulled out her mother's perfume bottle, but stopped before opening it. The scent belonged to her old life, and Mrs. Harrison was right. that life didn't exist anymore. She placed the bottle in her dresser drawer and closed it firmly. Then she set her alarm for 5:30 a.m. and lay down in the strange bed, forcing herself to breathe evenly to be strong. Tomorrow would be her first full day as property of the Harrisons. She would learn their rules, follow their orders, and survive. Because that's what she'd always done, survive. But as sleep finally came, Layla couldn't shake the feeling that surviving might not be enough anymore. In this glass house of wealth and privilege, she would have to become something else entirely. She just didn't know what that was yet. 3 months into her new life, Layla mastered the art of invisibility. She learned to move silently through the Harrison mansion, to anticipate needs before they were voiced, to exist in the periphery of the family's vision without drawing attention. The morning routine had become automatic. Wake at 5:30, shower quickly, help cook with breakfast preparation, press uniforms, pack lunches, ensure everything was perfect before the family descended from their rooms. Toast is cold, Emily complained one morning, not even looking at Layla as she pushed her plate away. I'll make fresh ones, Layla responded, already moving toward the kitchen. She'd learned to keep her voice neutral, her face expressionless. Emotions were luxuries she couldn't afford anymore. The new centerpiece is crooked, Mrs. Harrison called after her. Fix it before you go to school. School had become Layla's only respite, though even there she remained careful, guarded. She excelled in her studies, turning in pristine assignments and earning top marks. The teachers praised her dedication, unaware that perfection had become her shield. Late at night, after her duties were complete, Layla would sit at her small desk, studying by lamplight. She'd discovered that knowledge was the one thing the Harrisons couldn't control or take away. Each perfect grade was a silent rebellion, a reminder that she was more than just their servant. One night, unable to sleep, Layla ventured to the mansion's library to find a book for her history assignment. She froze when she saw a light already on. Mrs. Harrison sat in an armchair, reading. I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to disturb you. Mrs. Harrison looked up, studying Layla with new interest. What are you doing up at this hour? Research for school. About the Civil War. At midnight, Layla shifted uncomfortably. It's the only time I have after finishing my duties. Something flickered across Mrs. Harrison's face. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. She stood and walked to a shelf, pulling out a leather-bound book. Try this one. It's a first-hand account from a Union soldier. Much better than those simplified textbooks they give you. Layla took the book cautiously, unsure how to respond to this unexpected kindness. You're different from the others we've had, Mrs. Harrison said suddenly. You don't complain, don't make excuses. You just work. I understand my place, ma'am. Do you? Mrs. Harrison's eyes narrowed. And what exactly do you think the place is? Layla met her gaze steadily. Whatever you need it to be. A long moment passed between them. Finally, Mrs. Harrison nodded. You may use the library at night, after your duties, but I expect excellence in your studies. The Harrisons don't accept mediocrity, Layla finished. Yes, ma'am. I understand. As Layla turned to leave, Mrs. Harrison spoke again. Your father? Has he tried to contact you? No, ma'am. Good. The past has no place here. But later that night, alone in her room, Layla pulled out her mother's perfume bottle. She didn't open it. She never did anymore, but held it tightly, remembering a time when she was more than just a shadow in a grand house. The bottle was her secret rebellion, her reminder that before she was invisible, she had been loved. Before she was property, she had been free. And somewhere, beneath the perfect servant exterior she'd crafted, that free girl still existed, waiting, watching, learning, growing stronger with each passing day. Again, Mrs. Harrison commanded, watching Layla attempt to navigate the formal place setting. The dessert fork goes there, not there. And for heaven's sake, stop hunching your shoulders. Layla, now 14, carefully repositioned the fork. 4 years in the Harrison household had taught her that every detail mattered, every movement was scrutinized. But something had changed in recent months. Mrs. Harrison had taken a peculiar interest in her education. beyond just academic excellence. Tell me, Mrs. Harrison said, sipping her tea, what do you notice about the way Emily carries herself? Layla glanced at the Harrison's daughter, who sat doing homework across the room. She keeps her chin lifted, back straight. Her movements are deliberate. And why is that important? It shows confidence. Status. Mrs. Harrison's lips curved slightly. You're learning. These lessons had begun unexpectedly after Layla's teacher had called to praise her exceptional academic performance. Mrs. Harrison had found her in the library that night, surrounded by books. Your intelligence is a tool, she had said. But it's not enough. In this world, presentation matters as much as knowledge. Now, months later, Layla found herself receiving a different kind of education after her regular duties. Proper etiquette, social graces, the unspoken rules of high society. Mrs. Harrison taught her everything, though never explaining why. Mrs. Harrison, Maria had warned one evening, she's not one of your charity projects. She's staff. She's an investment, Mrs. Harrison had replied, not knowing Layla could hear them. Raw material with potential. Today's lesson moved from place settings to posture. Walk to the window, Mrs. Harrison instructed. Now back. No, your steps are too short. Think of yourself as floating, not walking. Why are you teaching me these things? Layla finally asked. Mrs. Harrison studied her for a long moment. Because you remind me of myself at your age. Determined, observant, hungry for more than life has given you. You weren't born wealthy? No. I married into this world. And I learned, as you're learning now, that class isn't just about money. It's about carrying yourself as though you deserve to be wherever you are. A sharp knock interrupted them. Mr. Harrison entered, his face grim. A call from the hospital, he said to his wife. Michael Connor was admitted. Alcohol poisoning. Layla's hands trembled slightly, but she kept her posture perfect, her face composed. Exactly as Mrs. Harrison had taught her. Does this concern you? Mrs. Harrison asked carefully. No, ma'am, Layla replied, though her heart raced. The past has no place here. Mrs. Harrison nodded approvingly. Good. Now, let's work on your dinner conversation skills. In this world, Layla, what you say is often less important than how you say it. That night, Layla lay awake, thinking about her father in the hospital. For years, and he'd never once tried to contact her. For years of building a new version of herself, learning to navigate this world of wealth and privilege. She touched her mother's perfume bottle, hidden beneath her pillow. The original scent had long faded, but she kept it as a reminder not of who she was, but of who she refused to become. She wouldn't end up like her father, destroyed by weakness. Nor would she become entirely like Mrs. Harrison, whose kindness always served a purpose. No, Layla would become something else entirely. She would take Mrs. Harrison's lessons, her father's failures, her mother's memory, and forge them into armor. She would learn not just to survive in this world, but to master it. And someday she would rewrite the rules of her own story. At 16, Layla stood before her mirror, adjusting her school uniform with practiced precision. She'd grown taller, her features sharpening from child to young woman. But it was her eyes that had changed the most, calculating, observant, never missing a detail. The Stanford representative is visiting today, Emily complained at breakfast, pushing her eggs around. Mother's making me attend the meeting, but I don't see the point. I'm obviously going to Yale like Daddy. Layla served fresh coffee silently, her mind already working. She'd seen the college representative's schedule on Mrs. Harrison's desk while cleaning. After Emily's appointment, there was a 30-minute gap before his next meeting. During lunch, Layla waited outside the guidance counselor's office. When Emily emerged from her meeting, rolling her eyes, Layla slipped inside. I'm sorry, but I don't have another appointment until, the representative began. I'll only need 15 minutes, sir, Layla said. Her posture perfect, voice modulated exactly as Mrs. Harrison had taught her. I'm very interested in Stanford's law program. He checked his schedule, frowning. You're not on my list. No, sir. I'm Layla Connor, She met his gaze steadily. I work for the Harrison family, but I'm first in my class, and I've prepared a presentation about why Stanford should consider me. Later that evening, as Layla served dinner, Mrs. Harrison noticed something different in her bearing. You seem pleased with yourself, she observed after the others had left. Stanford's representative was impressed with my academic record, Layla replied, clearing plates. He's recommending me for a scholarship interview. Mrs. Harrison set down her wine glass. Does James Harrison know you spoke to him? No, ma'am. Good. Keep it that way. She studied Layla thoughtfully. You're planning to leave us? It wasn't a question, but Layla answered anyway. Not leave, ma'am. Advance. A smile touched Mrs. Harrison's lips. Tell me about Stanford's law program. And so began a new phase of Layla's education. Mrs. Harrison secretly helped her prepare for college interviews, refine her applications, perfect her presentations. They worked late into the night in the library, going over practice questions and etiquette. Why are you helping me? Layla asked one evening. Because you've learned the most important lesson, Mrs. Harrison replied. Power isn't given. It's taken carefully and strategically by those who understand the game. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday. Full scholarship. Layla held the envelope in trembling hands, remembering a different Layla from years ago, holding eviction notices and unpaid bills. That night, someone knocked on her door. It was James, the youngest Harrison, now 14. I heard about Stanford, he said quietly. I'll miss you when you go. Layla felt a rare crack in her carefully constructed facade. James had always been kind to her, despite his mother's disapproval. Listen to me, she said, pulling him inside. You can be different from them. You don't have to. Layla, Mrs. Harrison's voice cut through the air. She stood in the hallway, her expression unreadable. James, go to your room. After he left, Mrs. Harrison entered Layla's room for the first time in 6 years. You've done well, she said, picking up the Stanford letter. But don't forget what you are. Success is a ladder, Layla. Use it wisely. But as Mrs. Harrison left, Layla looked at her mother's perfume bottle, now tucked safely in her Stanford acceptance package. Success wasn't a ladder, she decided. It was a weapon, and she was learning exactly how to use it. This isn't charity, Mrs. Harrison said, signing the final scholarship recommendation. You've earned this. Remember that when you're at Stanford. Layla, 18 now, stood in Mrs. Harrison's study, a very different person from the frightened 10-year-old who had entered this house. Her transformation was evident in every graceful movement, every carefully chosen word. The Harrisons will remain as my reference, Layla confirmed, her voice carrying the polished accent she'd adopted over the years. And I'll return during breaks to maintain my duties. No. Mrs. Harrison's response was sharp. When you leave for Stanford, you leave this life behind completely. I didn't spend 8 years polishing you to have you return as a maid. Layla felt a flicker of surprise crack through her composed facade. I don't understand. Yes, you do. Mrs. Harrison stood, crossing to the window. You're my greatest project, Layla. My masterpiece. I took a broken little girl and sculpted her into someone who can succeed in my world. Going backward isn't an option. A knock interrupted them. Emily burst in, her face flushed with anger. Mother, I just heard the most ridiculous rumor. They're saying Layla got into Stanford with a full scholarship. That's impossible. She's a servant. Mrs. Harrison's voice turned to ice. Close the door, Emily. But mother, now. Once Emily left, Mrs. Harrison turned back to Layla. That's your first test. How do you handle her? I don't, Layla replied smoothly. Emily's reaction is beneath my notice. Success is my only response. Perfect. Mrs. Harrison smiled. Now, about your father. He's in the hospital again, Layla interrupted. Liver failure this time. I saw the report on Mr. Harrison's desk. Will you visit him? Layla kept her face carefully neutral. Would you? No. But I'm not you. Aren't I? Layla met her mentor's gaze. You've spent 8 years teaching me to be exactly like you. Mrs. Harrison's expression softened slightly. No, Layla. I taught you to be better than me. I married into this world. You're going to conquer it. Later that night, Layla packed her small bag. 8 years of service had left her with few possessions, but each one was carefully chosen. Her mother's perfume bottle, now wrapped in her Stanford acceptance letter. A small notebook filled with Mrs. Harrison's lessons. A photo of James, the only Harrison who had treated her like a person. Maria found her in the kitchen, memorizing one last time the house she'd served for so long. You're really leaving us, Pequena? The old housekeeper's eyes were wet. I have to. Layla hugged her, allowing herself this one emotional indulgence. But I'll never forget who helped me survive here. You did more than survive, Maria said proudly. You bloomed, like a flower through concrete. As Layla prepared for bed one final time in her small room, she heard raised voices from Mr. Harrison's study. She's staff, Emily was shouting. You can't just turn her into one of us. She was never just staff, Mrs. Harrison replied calmly. She was an investment. And now that investment is about to pay off. Layla smiled to herself, thinking of her father's choice 8 years ago. He had sold her into servitude, thinking he was giving her a better life. He never imagined that his broken little girl would learn to play the game better than her masters. Tomorrow she would leave for Stanford. She would step into a new world, carrying with her the lessons of the old one. Mrs. Harrison had taught her well about power, about class, about turning disadvantages into weapons. But Layla had learned something else, something Mrs. Harrison never intended. How to wait, how to plan, how to transform rage into ambition. The chrysalis was finally breaking, and what would emerge was neither servant nor socialite, but something entirely new, something unstoppable. The autumn morning in Boston wrapped the city in crisp air and golden light. Layla Connor, now 25, exited the prestigious law firm where she'd recently made junior partner. Her Louboutin heels clicked against the pavement, her tailored suit a subtle display of the power she'd acquired. A disheveled man was sweeping the sidewalk outside the building. Layla barely noticed him. She'd learned long ago to look past such people, just as others had once looked past her. But something made her pause. A familiar movement, perhaps, or the way he hunched his shoulders against the world. The man looked up, and 15 years of carefully constructed walls trembled. Michael Connor dropped his broom, his weathered face draining of color. For a moment, they both stood frozen, the busy Boston street flowing around them like a river around stones. Layla? His voice cracked on her name. My God! Layla? She watched him fall to his knees, his body racked with sobs. Her first instinct was to keep walking, to treat him as she'd been treated, like someone beneath her notice. Mrs. Harrison would have approved of such a response. But Layla wasn't Mrs. Harrison. Get up, she said quietly, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Not here. Not like this. Michael struggled to his feet, his hands trembling. He looked older than his years, his face mapped with the consequences of his choices. But his eyes were clear, sober. How long? Layla asked, gesturing to his maintenance uniform. 2 years with the cleaning company. 2 years sober too. He couldn't stop staring at her. You look like your mother. The comparison hit her harder than she expected. She'd spent so long modeling herself after Mrs. Harrison. She'd almost forgotten her mother's gentle strength. There's a coffee shop around the corner, Layla said, checking her watch. I have 15 minutes. They sat in a quiet booth, Michael's calloused hands wrapped around a coffee cup, Layla's manicured fingers tapping against her untouched espresso. I've imagined this moment, Michael said, 1,000 times. The things I'd say, and now I can't find the words. He looked down at his hands. How do you apologize for selling your child? Layla's practiced composure wavered slightly. You don't. What they did to you, making you work like that. They didn't do anything to me, Layla interrupted. They gave me exactly what you sold me for: food, shelter, education. Everything else I took for myself. Michael flinched at her cold tone. Layla, please. If you could understand how desperate I was. I understood desperation at 10 years old, she replied. I understood it every morning I made your breakfast. Every night I washed your clothes. Every time I lied to protect you. The difference is, I didn't use it as an excuse. Tears rolled down Michael's cheeks. You were just a child. Yes, Layla stood, smoothing her suit. She placed her business card on the table. I have meetings. If you're truly sober, truly ready to face what you did, you can call my office. We'll set up a proper appointment. You sound like one of them now. Layla smiled, a sharp expression she'd learned from Mrs. Harrison. No, father. I sound like someone who survived them. And you? As she walked back to her office, Layla pulled out her phone and made a call. Mrs. Harrison? Yes, it's Layla. You were right. He found me exactly where you said he would. She paused, listening. No, I handled it, just like you taught me. But after hanging up, Layla reached into her purse and touched her mother's perfume bottle, still carried after all these years. Its presence reminded her that while Mrs. Harrison had taught her how to win, her mother had taught her something far more important: how to stay human while doing it. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. You dropped something at the coffee shop, Layla said, sliding the worn AA chip across her office desk. 2 weeks had passed since their first encounter, and Michael sat before her, looking small in the elegant conference room. 1 year, he said, picking up the chip. It's not my first time reaching a year, but it's the first time it's stuck. Layla studied him with the same analytical precision she used on difficult cases. His clothes were clean but worn, his posture humble but not defeated. The tremors she remembered from childhood were gone. Why now? She asked. Why stay sober now? Because I finally had nothing left to lose. Michael met her gaze. When you see the bottom, really see it, you either die there or you climb out. I chose to climb. Tell me about the climbing. Rehab. Real rehab, not the state programs. Priest helped me get in. I work as a janitor at his church too, not just the office buildings. He hesitated. I've been trying to make amends to people I hurt, and now you've reached me. You're not just another amend, Layla. You're the reason I'm alive. The shame of what I did to you, it kept me drinking for years, but it also kept me from ending it all. I had to live with what I'd done. Layla's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. Did you ever try to find me? Before now. Once. 5 years ago. I went to the Harrison estate. Michael's voice shook. Mrs. Harrison herself came out. Told me you were beyond my reach now. That I'd sold more than just your labor. I'd sold any right to know you. She told me about that visit, Layla said. She used it as a lesson about handling unwanted complications from the past. Michael flinched. Is that what I am to you? An unwanted complication? Layla stood, walking to her office window. Below, Boston's financial district hummed with power and privilege. Her world now. So far from the broken apartment of her childhood. When I was 16, she said quietly, Mrs. Harrison taught me that power isn't in what you can take, but in what you can withhold. Forgiveness, she said, is the ultimate power move. She turned back to Michael. Do you know what I learned from that lesson? What? That she was wrong. Real power isn't in withholding forgiveness. It's in choosing to give it despite having every reason not to. Michael's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve forgiveness. No, you don't. Layla sat back down. But healing isn't about deserving. It's about choosing. And I'm tired of letting what you did define who I am. She pulled out her mother's perfume bottle, her one constant through all the years. Mom would want me to find peace. Not for you, but for myself. Catherine always was the strong one, Michael whispered, recognizing the bottle. You have her strength? No, Layla replied. I have my own. She opened her calendar. I have dinner meetings every Thursday with potential clients. Next week, you'll join me. We'll talk. Really talk. About everything. I can't afford, you're not paying. And we're not going to some place where you'd feel uncomfortable. There's a diner near your church. We'll start there. As Michael stood to leave, he paused at the door. The Harrisons. Did they ever? They gave me exactly what they promised you. Layla cut him off. A better life. Everything else, the strength, the ambition, the power that came from surviving what you did to me. After he left, Layla called Mrs. Harrison. He came to your office? Her mentor asked. Yes, and I'm going to have dinner with him next week. A long pause. That's not what I taught you. No, Layla agreed. It's what I'm teaching myself. Layla sat in her office, staring at the Boston Globe article on her screen. The headline glared back at her, From Servant to Success. The dark secret behind rising star attorney. Her phone buzzed continuously, colleagues, clients, reporters. Even Mrs. Harrison had called twice, though Layla hadn't answered. The carefully constructed walls between her past and present had crumbled overnight. Ms. Connor, her assistant, poked her head in. The managing partners want to see you. And there's a reporter from the Globe in the lobby. Tell the partners I'll be there in 5 minutes. Send the reporter away. Layla's voice remained steady, controlled, a skill learned from years of serving breakfast to people who saw through her. She opened her desk drawer and took out her mother's perfume bottle, now a talisman for difficult moments. The article had been thorough, too thorough. Someone had talked about the money her father had received, about her years of domestic servitude at the Harrison estate, about child labor laws violated and conveniently overlooked. Her phone buzzed again. Michael. She answered on the third ring. I didn't talk to them, he said immediately. Layla, I swear. I know, she cut him off. This isn't your doing. She had a good idea who was behind it. Emily Harrison had never accepted her rise from servant to equal. Now, with Layla's firm handling a case against one of the Harrisons' business interests, the timing was too perfect to be coincidental. The partners were surprisingly supportive, seeing the potential PR value in her story. American Dream, they called it. Pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. They wanted her to do interviews, become the face of the firm's commitment to diversity and opportunity. But it was Mrs. Harrison's reaction that surprised her most. You're handling this wrong, her former mentor said when Layla finally returned her call. Stop hiding. Own the story. It's not a story, Layla replied. It's my life. Everything is a story, Layla. I taught you that. The only question is who gets to tell it. Later that day, as Layla prepared for a press conference, she received another call from James Harrison. I'm sorry, he said. I tried to stop Emily when I found out what she was planning. But you know how she is. It's fine, James. Some secrets aren't meant to stay buried forever. Mother's furious with her. Says Emily never learned the most important lesson. That true power isn't in exposing secrets, but in knowing when to keep them. Layla smiled slightly. Your mother's lessons always did have layers. Standing before the press, Layla felt strangely calm. She looked out at the sea of cameras and saw another opportunity, not just for herself, but for every child failed by the system. Yes, I was sold into domestic servitude at age 10, she began. Yes, I worked as a servant for one of Boston's wealthiest families. And yes, I rose from that position to become who I am today. But this isn't a story about triumph over adversity. It's a story about a system that allows children to be traded like commodities, about privilege that turns a blind eye to exploitation, and about the changes we need to make. As she spoke, Layla felt herself transforming once again. Not into someone new, but into someone complete, integrating all the parts of herself she'd kept separated for so long. The scared little girl making breakfast for her alcoholic father. The silent servant learning power by watching those who wielded it. The ambitious student turning pain into determination. The successful attorney using her position to effect change. They were all her, all part of a story she was finally ready to tell. On her own terms. Layla sat in Mrs. Harrison's study, the same room where 8 years ago she'd received her path to Stanford. But now, she wasn't the polished protege seeking approval. She was an equal, facing a reckoning long overdue. You knew, Layla said quietly. When my father sold me to you, you knew exactly what you were doing. Mrs. Harrison set down her tea. I saw potential. Raw, unformed. But there. I was 10 years old. Yes, Mrs. Harrison's mask slipped slightly. A child serving children barely older than herself. Even then, I knew it was Complicated. Complicated. Layla's laugh held no humor. You turned a blind eye to child labor. You made me work for my basic needs. I gave you an education, not just in books but in power, in survival. Mrs. Harrison leaned forward. Look at yourself, Layla. Look at what you've become. Is that supposed to justify it? No. Mrs. Harrison stood, moving to the window where she'd once watched a young Layla learn to walk with grace. What we did was wrong. What I did was wrong. But you and I both know this isn't about justice. It's about acknowledgement. Layla felt tears threatening but held them back. You treated me like a project, an investment, because that was the only way I could justify it to myself. Mrs. Harrison turned, her composure cracking. If I'd let myself see you as a child, if I'd truly faced what we were doing, you would have had to stop. Layla finished. You would have had to face your own complicity. Yes, the admission hung between them, but I also would have lost the chance to shape you into someone who could fight back. Someone who could change things. Layla stood, touching her mother's perfume bottle in her pocket. I've started a foundation for children in exploitative situations. Domestic workers, undocumented minors, kids trapped in cycles of poverty. I know. Mrs. Harrison smiled slightly. Emily's been quite vocal about it. I want you on the board. Mrs. Harrison's surprise showed clearly. Why? Because you understand both sides. The exploiters and the exploited. The powerful and the powerless. Layla met her mentor's gaze. And because you owe me. Using guilt as leverage. Mrs. Harrison's smile widened. I taught you well. No, Layla corrected. You taught me power. My mother taught me purpose. I figured out how to combine them on my own. As she left the Harrison estate, Layla paused in the kitchen where she'd spent so many mornings. Maria was there, older but still working. You did it, Pequena, the old housekeeper said proudly. You built bridges between their world and ours. Layla hugged her, no longer bound by rules of propriety. Not bridges, Maria. Ladders. For others to climb. In her car, Layla called her father. I'm having dinner with the Harrisons next week, she said. All of them. I want you there. Michael's shock was audible. Layla, I can't. That's not my world. No, it's not. But I live in both worlds now. And I need you there. Not as the man who sold me, but as the man trying to make amends. After hanging up, Layla looked at herself in the rearview mirror. She saw all her iterations reflected back. The scared child, the invisible servant, the ambitious student, the powerful attorney. But most importantly, she saw herself whole, unbroken, and ready for whatever came next. The banquet hall of the Four Seasons Boston hummed with power and privilege. Layla stood at the podium, her voice carrying across the crowded room filled with Boston's elite, social workers, advocates, and survivors. The Connor Foundation isn't just about preventing exploitation, she said, her eyes finding familiar faces in the crowd. It's about recognizing that every child deserves more than survival. They deserve the chance to thrive. Michael sat in the back, uncomfortable in his borrowed suit but sitting straight, his 2-year sobriety chip in his pocket. Next to him, Mrs. Harrison maintained her usual poise, though her eyes held an unusual brightness as she watched her former project become something more than even she had envisioned. When I was 10 years old, Layla continued, I learned that children can be sold, that poverty can make monsters of loving parents, that privilege can blind good people to suffering. She paused, touching her mother's perfume bottle, now displayed on the podium. But I also learned that transformation is possible, that wounds can become wisdom, that even the deepest betrayals can, in time, lead to understanding. In the audience, James Harrison watched proudly while Emily sat stiffly, still struggling with her role in recent events. Maria had been given a place of honor at the main table, her weathered hands folded in her lap as she beamed at the girl she'd helped raise. Tonight, we're announcing the opening of 3 transitional homes for at-risk children, places where they can find not just shelter, but education, support, and the tools to rewrite their own stories. Layla's voice strengthened. These homes will be staffed by survivors, guided by experts, and funded by those who understand that privilege comes with responsibility. Mrs. Harrison nodded slightly. She had been the first donor, though she'd insisted on remaining anonymous. Her contribution had come with a letter to correct past wrongs and honor future rights. But most importantly, Layla continued, these homes will stand as proof that your past does not define your future, that the cycles of poverty, addiction, and exploitation can be broken, that even the deepest wounds can heal. She lifted her mother's perfume bottle. This was my mother's. I've carried it for 15 years, through every transformation, every struggle, every victory. The scent faded long ago, but its meaning never has. It reminded me that before I was anyone else's project, investment, or achievement, I was Catherine Connor's daughter. Loved, worthy, free. Layla's eyes met her father's. Today, I'm donating this bottle to be displayed in the first Connor house. Not as a reminder of loss, but as a symbol of resilience. Because every child who enters those doors needs to know what I finally learned, that their worth isn't determined by what's been done to them, but by what they choose to do with their pain. After the speeches, after the donations and pledges, Layla found herself in a quiet corner with her father and Mrs. Harrison. The unlikely trio sat in silence until Michael spoke. I sold you to become their servant, he said quietly, and you turned around and made them serve your vision. Our vision, Layla corrected. Each of us played a part in this story. The desperate father, the complicit benefactors, the resilient child. Together, we're going to make sure it doesn't happen to others. Mrs. Harrison touched Layla's hand. You've exceeded every expectation. No, Layla smiled. I've defied them. There's a difference. Later that night, Layla stood alone in what would become the first Connor house. Empty rooms waited to be filled with children seeking refuge, hope, transformation. She thought of her younger self, terrified and betrayed, not knowing that her darkest moment would eventually light the way for others. The future stretched before her, not as a path to power or a quest for revenge, but as a bridge between worlds, the wounded and the healers, the privileged and the struggling, the past and the future. Layla Connor, once sold but never owned, had finally found her true purpose, ensuring that every child's story could be one of triumph rather than tragedy. The perfume bottle would stand in the entrance hall, its empty vessel filled with new meaning. Just like her,